Hi, I'm Jennifer from jenniferleads.com. Today we're going to talk about speech difficulties and how those can be related to dyslexia. I'm also going to give you some strategies that you might use to help improve your child's speech skills. I want to start by talking about first, if you are concerned about your child's speech skills, you should consult a speech-language pathologist. A speech-language pathologist will look at your child's speech skills and give a test such as the Goldman-Fristow or the Linguasystems articulation test to look at the specific sounds within words and to see whether your child can produce those sounds at the beginning of words, in the middle of words, and at the end of words. That's the typical speech test that will be given by a speech-language pathologist. You should also request that your child be given the Comprehensive Test of Phonological Processing 2, also known as the CTOP-2. That test is going to specifically look at the part of the brain that deals with the sounds of our language. It examines your child's phonological awareness, which is their ability to think about and manipulate the sounds of our language. It also looks at their phonological memory, or their memory for what they hear, and it examines their ability to retrieve words quickly from their long-term memory, which is called rapid naming. Those three areas are linked to dyslexia, and those all can affect your child's speech skills beyond just the articulation or being able to correctly form those sounds and produce those sounds. So to get a more thorough understanding, especially if your child has already been diagnosed with dyslexia, or if you're concerned about dyslexia, you should also request the CTOP-2 be completed. Typically, children who have speech difficulties who are dyslexic will exhibit two types of errors. One of those kinds of errors is when they mix the sounds and syllables within a word. So for instance, when my daughter was learning to speak, she would say Rice Krispies instead of Rice Krispies. Same with my son, who would say strategy instead of strategy, and monodos for dominoes. So if you think about that, they're just taking the syllables and they're mixing the sounds within those syllables and they're getting them out of order. It's a sequencing difficulty. Children who have dyslexia typically have a difficult time with sound sequencing and keeping those sounds in the correct order and in the correct syllables. So that's one type of error you might see with your child if they have dyslexia. The other error would be sound substitutions. So because their brain, there's a difficulty with the sound processing or the phonological module, they struggle to process sounds clearly and distinctly. Their brain doesn't necessarily process an R, the R sound, separately or differently from the W sound. So it's something that we have to train them how to do. So for instance, when my son was learning to speak, he said the W, the L, the R, and the TH all as the W sound. So I had to train his brain and work with him to be able to process those sounds as clear and distinct sounds. If we take just a step back for a minute and we talk about dyslexia and the definition of dyslexia, we know that dyslexia is related to a deficit in the sound processing part of our language center, or as Dr. Shaywitz at Yale calls it, the phonological module. And again, that's the part of our brain that deals with sounds. She compares the way our children perceive sounds to the way a paper through a washing machine might look. If you looked at that paper, it'd be unclear and messy and indistinct. And that's typically the way a child who has dyslexia processes the sounds of our language. So they aren't able to distinguish those individual sounds within the word clearly and distinctly. So if I say the word fan, a typical brain will hear those sounds f, a, n, individually and be able to separate those sounds out within the word fan. And our brain does that without us even thinking about it. For a child who has dyslexia, those sounds are muddled and mixed together and unclear, so they might process the word fan as one distinct messy unit, more like kind of sloppy and messy and unclear. So again, you can recognize why they may have a speech sound error when they try to produce those words, because that's the way their brain is interpreting those sounds as unclear and indistinct. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about today would be when your child is exhibiting those speech errors where they mix up the sounds and the syllables within the word. So again, we'll take my daughter's Rice Krispie example as our starting spot. So if we think about when my daughter said Rice Krispies, what I would do with her would be break that word down into its syllables. So we want her to recognize that there are 3 parts in the word Rice Krispies. And we would do that visually. Again, at this point, she couldn't read the word Rice Krispies, but it's okay still to use that representation so they recognize that there are 3 parts. So we have rice, Kris, peas. And what we would do is I would say the word rice, or the syllable rice, and she would tap on the side of her leg, or you can tap on the table. So we have rice, Kris, peas. And we slowly start to put those words, or those parts of words, together so that they're said a little bit closer and a little bit with a less of a pause in between each syllable. So rice, Kris, peas. Rice, Kris, peas. If your child is struggling still to say those words correctly, you may want to get a visual representation or manipulative out in front of them. So just like you would move when they're reading, we're going to go from left to right. So you would have your child move an index card or move something to represent each syllable. So we have rice, Kris, peas. If she or he gets stuck in a certain area, you might go back to that area and just say that part. So we might go back to Kris. Say Kris. Now say rice, Kris. Now say Kris, peas. Kris, peas. Krispies. And we can use these manipulatives to help them process those individual sounds. So again, when we're moving on to the word that my son struggled with, so we have the word strategy. We have 3 syllables again, and we're going to break that apart so that they can see those parts. Strategy, strategy. We'll tap those out. Strategy, strategy. Again, just practicing saying those broken apart in syllables, 1 part at a time, and we're manipulating or we're touching our hand against something so that we're activating not only our sound part of our brain, but also activating our motor strip or the movement part of our brain. Also, we're looking at visual characteristics here so we can see that there are 3 parts. So we're incorporating our visual part of our brain, and the more parts of our brain that we can incorporate, the stronger those representations get in our brain and the less likely we are to struggle saying those sounds and those words. So as we are working on words like this, with the sounds and the syllables mixed up within the words, so if we're saying synonym for cinnamon, then we can do the same basic activity, and we want to practice maybe 2 words per week, 2 to 5 words, and we just want to keep practicing these same words over and over. So every morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you choose, whenever your child's most likely to attend and work with you, just a couple minutes of practice where you tap out those syllables and you think about those parts of the word. So rice, Kris, peas. Again, it works best if you get words that your child uses frequently and that they mispronounce frequently. So you want to keep targeting these words that are in their vocabulary and that they use a lot, so that you're working on words that are going to be helpful and beneficial to improving their speech. As you go, you want to punch holes in the corner of these and just keep these words. Again, you work on the 2 through 5 words every day for about 2 minutes, just practicing those, breaking them into syllables. And at the end of the week, you'll come up with 2 more words that you've noticed your child getting the sounds and syllables mixed up within those words, and you'll target those words next. You'll keep all of the words on a not on the binder, but on the book ring, and you'll continually review and go over those words. Because your child has practiced these words so frequently and so often, when they start to say those words, they'll remember that it's one of their target words, and their brain will immediately think, oh, that's one of my words, and then they'll start to remember to use those words correctly and to think about breaking it into a syllable to be able to pronounce it correctly. So again, just keep those on a ring and keep the words that your child uses most frequently and that you notice the most errors, and work on those words each week, a couple minutes every day, just 2 through 5 words at a time.